So recently I've been making a few videos focusing on unusual demands made by actors, directors, and even some studios when it comes to getting film projects off the ground. And now it's the MCU's turn, so buckle up my friends, as some of these really are quite mad. So with this in mind, I'm Jules, this is WhatCulture.com, and these are 10 unusual demands made by MCU actors. Number 10, to keep food hidden around the set during shooting, Robert Downey Jr. Now it's fair to say that the MCU wouldn't be what it is today without the invaluable contributions of Robert Downey Jr., whose performance in the original Iron Man built a firm foundation for everything that followed. As such, it's little surprise that Marvel Studios has generously rewarded Downey over the years with colossal paydays for the Avengers movies in particular, culminating in him netting a stonking $75 million for his part in Avengers Endgame. But Downey had an altogether more particular demand while shooting his various MCU films, that he be allowed to keep food hidden on the sets for snacking. It's no secret that we often see Tony Stark eating a snack or drinking something during his scenes, and generally speaking, this isn't written into the script. Instead, Downey had simply just picked up one of the snacks he's hidden around the set and started eating it during the take. Evidently, it's something that Big Kev and the various directors have acquiesced to, because let's face it, if your frontline star wants to eat some blueberries during a take and it doesn't ruin the scene, why not let him? It's certainly consistent with the Tony Stark character and ultimately became something of an endearing trait, so it was most certainly for the best. Number 9, creative control over his movies, Edward Norton. The curious case of Edward Norton's all too brief tenure in the MCU sure is fascinating. If you know much about Norton at all, you'll be aware that he likes to exert a large degree of creative control over the projects he appears in, and this extended even to his initial role as Bruce Banner in the MCU. Norton made his first and only appearance as the character in 2008's The Incredible Hulk, where he was given the latitude to rewrite Zack Penn's original script, though ended up coming to blows with Marvel over the movie's final cut during post-production. This led to Norton being absent for much of the movie's North American publicity tour, and with it being clear that he simply required more creativity than Big Kev was willing to give, the producer decided to dismiss Norton from the role. Or, if you believe Norton's account, he walked away. Either way, Norton was replaced with Mark Ruffalo, who effortlessly picked up the mantle and has received consistent acclaim for his performance in the role ever since. As brilliant an actor as Edward Norton is, expecting to have major creative control in such a massive ensemble enterprise comes off as either arrogant or naive. And had he stayed on board for future films, the clashes likely would have only become more intense. Stepping away was probably the right call for everyone involved. Number 8, to do the Green Goblin's stunts himself, Willem Dafoe. Fans were thrilled when Willem Dafoe was confirmed to be reprising the role of Norman Osborn / Green Goblin in the recent Spider-Man No Way Home, but the Oscar-nominated actor only agreed to take the gig on one condition. In addition to refusing to shoot a mere fan service cameo role, Dafoe demanded that he be allowed to perform as many of the stunts as possible himself and get more actively involved in the action. He said, "I really didn't want to do a cameo. I wanted to make sure that there was something substantial enough to do that wasn't just a tip of the hat. And the other thing was, I said I really want there to be action. I want to take part in action scenes, because that's really fun for me. It's the only way to root the character, otherwise it just becomes a series of memes." While it's reasonable to assume that the 66-year-old Dafoe didn't perform every last Green Goblin stunt in the movie, it's clear from watching No Way Home that Dafoe is himself in the mix for many of his physical altercations with Spider-Man. Given that Dafoe's terrifying physicality was one of the movie's most praised aspects, it was certainly a smart call to let him break a sweat. Number 7, kill Hawkeye, Jeremy Renner. Though Jeremy Renner already had 2 Oscar nominations to his name before joining the MCU, there's no denying that his role as Hawkeye catapulted him to unimaginable stardom, and yet Renner found himself angling for an exit from the franchise while shooting just his second MCU movie. Hawkeye, of course, had an uncredited cameo in Thor before getting his proper coming-out party in The Avengers, where he spends most of the film as a mind-control stooge at the command of Loki. Renner wasn't too thrilled about being turned into a zombie-like underling for much of the first major MCU outing, to the extent that he not so jokingly suggested to Joss Whedon to just kill him off outright. He said, "I never really told anybody this, but in the first Avengers, I was just getting to know who Hawkeye was, and then zap, I go round like a zombie. I'm like Loki's minion. And I'm still not even sure who Hawkeye was at this point, so I'm a little frustrated because I was so excited to figure out who Hawkeye was." To hammer this frustration home and make it clear that he wasn't satisfied with his part, Renner would actually occasionally act out dying during the shoot. He said, "I just had a heart attack in every scene. I'd just be walking with Scarlett Johansson, and just be like, ugh, and they'd say, what are you doing, man? I'm giving you an option. If you just want to kick me out of the movie, just, at any given moment, if you want to kill me off, Daddy's gonna have a heart attack. Whedon opted not to take Renner up on his suggestion, and perhaps as recompense for his complaints, Hawkeye had a significantly expanded arc in Avengers Age of Ultron. Renner added later that he was ultimately glad that he wasn't killed off, as latter films gave him a greater opportunity to explore the character. Number 6. Cooler hair for Peter Parker, Tom Holland. By his very nature, Peter Parker isn't supposed to be the coolest kid on the block, though by the time it came to shoot Spider-Man No Way Home, both Peter and actor Tom Holland had seemingly grown a little more assertive, and so rising star Holland decided to flex some of his newfound clout when it came to Peter's look in the threequel, namely his haircut. Holland started shooting No Way Home literally days after wrapping principal photography on Uncharted, and because that film required him to have a cooler, more styled haircut, the original plan was to have him wear a wig while shooting the Spider-Man sequel to approximate Peter's more nerdy, messy hairstyle, but Holland wasn't having any of it and demanded that the production basically just deal with the fact that Peter's hair looked like this now. Despite his youth, Holland is fast proving himself to be one of the biggest draws in the industry, so quibbling with him over hair of all things probably would have been the wrong call. Number 5. No running scenes for Nick Fury, Samuel L. Jackson. The MCU was extraordinarily lucky to scoop up Samuel L. Jackson, one of the most popular and recognizable actors on the planet, to play steely S.H.I.E.L.D. director Nick Fury. Fury has appeared in more MCU movies than just about any other character, though Jackson's long Marvel tenure began with one simple demand: don't make him run. After briefly appearing in the Iron Man, Thor, and Captain America movies, Jackson was set to have a more prominent part in 2012's The Avengers, and had a meeting with writer-director Joss Whedon over the script. Whedon asked Jackson if there was anything he wished to avoid doing, and Jackson flatly requested, "Don't make me run a lot." Yet Whedon didn't exactly heed the actor's request, as when Jackson showed up to shoot his scenes, he approached Whedon and pointed to a stage direction on the script which said, "Fury runs." Even so, it's fair to say that Jackson hasn't had to do much running in the MCU since, and most of his appearances are characterized by him either standing or sitting while dropping crucial exposition. It's easy to forget that Jackson is now 73 years of age, so you can't really blame him for wanting to take it a bit easier. Number 4. Amy Pascal to play Aunt May's girlfriend, MARISA Tomei. MARISA Tomei's new version of Aunt May introduced in Spider-Man Homecoming was certainly a radical reinvention for the character, reimagining her as considerably younger and hipper. But from the early going, before May was paired with Happy Hogan, Tomei loved the idea of May being with a woman, and more to the point, she even had the very woman in mind. Tomei really wanted May's girlfriend to be played by none other than long-tenured Sony producer Amy Pascal, who has produced every single Spider-Man movie, both live-action and animated, since Homecoming. And the actress said of the choice, "I was like, no one even has to know Amy. It'll just be a scene and you'll be over there. It'll just be like a subtle thing." No one went for it at the time. Suggesting that Aunt May be gay or bi certainly wasn't a bizarre request, though demanding that her partner be played by one of the movie's producers, who has no acting experience at all no less, probably was. In this case, the demand was flatly rejected, and the MCU pushed forward instead with May and Happy's awkward on-off romance. Number 3. To not be micromanaged by Marvel, Florence Pugh. Fans were elated when the great Florence Pugh was cast as Yelena in Black Widow, even as some expressed concern that a talented up-and-comer like Pugh would basically be wasted in a rather nothing role. Thankfully, this wasn't the case, though Pugh was more concerned that taking her first role in a major blockbuster franchise could severely restrict her freedoms, not only creatively, but personally as well. Now, we've all of course heard of the ridiculous contractual agreements actors in mega-budget franchises have to agree to, and in Pugh's case, she was adamant that Marvel Studios wouldn't be breathing down her neck and micromanaging her life during the shoot. She said, "When I got the job, I wanted to know what the regime was. I wanted to know whether it was them or me calling the shots. That was a big deal for me. I didn't want to be part of something where I was constantly checked on and people making sure I was in the right shape. That's not me at all." In addition to insisting that there weren't executives keeping an eye on her weight and general physical conditioning, she also decided to cook her own food throughout the shoot rather than having a location chef cook meals for her. Pugh has been open in the past about her distaste for Hollywood's obsession with women being impossibly slender, and so found herself empowered to ensure that she wasn't treated in a dehumanizing way while shooting Black Widow. Number 2. To sing Agatha all along herself, Kathryn Hahn. Perhaps the single greatest thing about WandaVision is that it introduced the great Kathryn Hahn to a whole new audience of fans. Khan, of course, played the deliciously villainous witch Agatha Harkness, and made one hilariously particular demand while shooting her scenes, because the character is perhaps best remembered for her song Agatha All Along, which she sings while revealing her villainous identity to Wanda. However, originally it was up in the air as to whether Hahn would actually sing the song herself, at which point the actress insisted that nobody else would sing it for her. She said, "I put headphones headphones on, listened to it, and stared slack-jawed at the director, who was looking at me with such a grin. I got asked about singing it, and I said that they'd have to pry it out of my hands. There was no way anybody else was singing it. And like that, an iconic MCU moment was born, the popularity of which surely aided Marvel Studios in greenlighting an Agatha spin-off series known as Agatha House of Harkness. And number 1, a $100 million salary for Black Widow, Scarlett Johansson. A few months before Black Widow's release last summer, Disney announced plans to release it on Disney Plus the same day it hit cinemas around the world and sent shockwaves throughout the industry. Most unexpectedly, this resulted in a lawsuit from star Scarlett Johansson, who understandably was feeling that she was going to miss out on a residual payment that she would have got from a theatrical exclusive release, and so sued Disney for lost profits. Johansson's suit ultimately asked for an eye-watering total of $100 million, her $20 million upfront fee plus $80 million in residuals that she believes she would have received had the film been released pre-pandemic. Even for an A-lister like Johansson, though, that number seemed very, very high. Robert Downey Jr., a far more vital component of the MCU, never made more than $75 million on any of its MCU movies, so $100 million for a Black Widow spin-off that most fans agree came a few years too late seemed rather excessive. Ultimately, it was clear what Johansson was really doing, asking for far more than she actually wanted in the hopes of securing her actual figure, a classic negotiations tactic, of course. In the end, Johansson received a $40 million settlement from Disney, just half of the $80 million that she demanded on top of her initial fee, but ultimately was probably around the figure that she actually wanted. And there we go, my friends. Those were 10 unusual demands made by MCU actors. I hope you enjoyed that, and please let me know what you thought about it down in the comments section below. As always, I've been Jules. You can go follow me over on Twitter at RetroJ with a 0, or you can swing by Live and Let's Dice, where I do all of my streaming outside of work, and it'd be great to see you over there, my friends. But before I go, I just want to say one thing. Something that I hope will not be an unusual demand, and that is that you treat yourself with love and respect, my friend, because you are a massive ledge and you deserve all of the best things in life, like love, happiness, and success. And do not let anything or anyone else tell you otherwise, alright? Now go out there and smash it. As always, I've been Jules, you have been awesome, never forget that, and I'll speak to you soon.